Today is Cobra time. We get this guy out. Yes, it's finally time to play around with the Cobra, so why haven't we been getting it out more often and playing with it? I don't know. Why is it just sitting here? Let's get in there. Oh, hold on. Hold on, I can do it. On that. Wait, let me go the other side. Yeah, this will work. All right, hold on. I got it. Oh yeah, okay. No worries. Let's just move the red car. What? No worries. I'll just move the red car. That's okay. We just moved the truck. Okay, not too bad. Just gotta move all of this and the truck. No. How does this even happen? Okay, so we just gotta move the BMW, move the truck, move the Fox, move the Coyote, and then we'll get the Cobra out. Yeah, then we'll do it. Okay, here we go. What? I'm starting to remember why we don't get the Cobra out much. Okay, finally some Cobra time. Let's see if this thing will even start. It hasn't started in 6+ months, and it hasn't actually run in about a year, hasn't been driven. Well, you get an idea. We cleared out some space, so let's get this thing going. Let's see if it'll even start and run. Woo! It feels good to be back in here. Alright, here we go. Oh, it actually started. A little bit sad. I mean, sounds like it's got a belt squeaking too. But it started. I'm happy about that. Alright, well, I guess get this thing backed up. Get our gauges here. Everything's nice and cold. Oh, what's that ethanol? 82.5. Yeah, it's not bad for like year-old gas. Alright. Well, let's get around this car and take a look. Okay, I shut it down because it's kind of loud and it's going to be impossible to hear me talking over the engine and noise. So I'm not even sure where to start, honestly. It's just so much. So why don't we just walk around, just dive into it, and just go through it and see what's going on. All right, well, let's start with the Monster 4x4 suspension. Why is the car sitting up like that? Well, it's on Viking coilovers all around, front and rear. And when I moved, I needed to roll it up high so I could get it on a trailer. And that was, what, about 2 years ago? And loaded up here, and it's just sat like that ever since. That's also why it doesn't have the 15-inch on the back with the slicks or radials or whatever I'm playing with. I needed it, it didn't fit on the trailer, so that answers that. I guess let's look under the hood. That's probably a good starting point. Ah, yes, under the hood. What do we see? Oh, it's painted. Okay, so it's a pretty empty looking engine bay. There's a few reasons. The power steering setup right here is gone. The engine coolant expansion tank here is gone. And the supercharger intercooler tank here is gone. So that really opens it up. And there was normally a factory piece that came out of here, like a big T-pipe with a big hose that went straight down. Cleared all of that out, and the fuse box I relocated inside, did like a wire tuck. That really opens it up. So it almost looks like it's not a running engine because it's kind of empty, but things are actually still there. See, the power steering is here. I just used AM lines and I ran them into the fender well. This is actually my power steering reservoir. Don't mind my awesome welds. I obviously don't weld for a living, but you know, it works. So I took some 3-inch pipe, did the appropriate baffling and connections, drilled holes through the bottom here so they actually go straight through. That way it looks kind of clean. You don't see the hoses coming in or out of it. Right next to it is the expansion tank. Oh, it's actually missing. Oh, that's right. So anyway, it has a black cap just like that that matches, so it looks nicer. You have to cut these little wing tabs off. And I actually had a problem with a previous cap. I had to swap it out, and I just haven't transferred the lid. I have to cut these little wings off and transfer the cap. Anyways, getting sidetracked. So this is a pre-made tank I bought. I just did some modifying on it, welded an extra bung in it and stuff, and I welded some fittings on the bottom that I needed. So my hoses go through the bottom here once again for that clean look, so it just looks like they're just sitting there. It's your basic Cobra engine. I have an aluminum block. It's got the 2.3 TVS on top, VMP one. I have stock heads, but they're ported. Got custom cams. Oh man, cams. That's a whole thing. I have been through so many cams on this motor. I could add them up. It's about 4 or 5 sets. I had troubles. I thought, you know, it was the cam. I was having a little bit of blower surge and part throttle driving, and I got real picky because it's not a dedicated race car. I like to drive it on the street, and I wanted it to work right. I ordered custom cams for it. That didn't quite fix the problem. I designed my own cams, and I got a lot closer, but the problem ultimately turned out to not be the cams. It was, I mean, it kind of was. It was more the way that they were being degreed and the vacuum and the bypass valve, all that stuff. There's a formula to getting all that to play right on the street. I finally nailed that. It drives like stock, beautiful, with custom cams. So I'm very happy about that finally. It was a lot of work. It got to where I was swapping cams in the car, redegreeing them in an evening. It's kind of wild. No one should have to get that far into the cams. So obviously there's a fuel system on it. It's got some Dash 8 AN lines, bigger injectors. Forget what's in there right now. I had ID 1700s for a while. I actually stepped them down. I actually toned the whole car down. Long story short, this lower crank pulley, I kept breaking it with the bigger pulleys and just, you know, getting on the car too hard. So I toned everything down. It makes less power now. It's a smaller blower, and I put smaller injectors, and I want to say they're 1300s or something like that. I'd have to go check. Crank is mostly stock. It's studded up front, so it has a 5/8 head stud. For those of you that don't know, on the lower crank pulleys, it's a huge issue on these cars, breaking them with bigger blowers, and the problem like magnifies greatly when you go to a high compression motor, and that's what I did here. And the RPMs become so responsive, up and down so quick, you start breaking lower crank pulleys. So one scenario that you can try and work around this is you drill a hole through the center of the crank and you put a 5/8 head stud in there, and that way you use the clamping force of the nut and you have the strength of the ARP 5/8 head stud in there, and the idea is that you won't snap the crank snout. It's not foolproof, but it helps. It buys you time. To become more foolproof, I went with a smaller blower. Is it gonna live forever? I don't know, but I was just tired of breaking parts. About every 400 miles I destroyed a lower crank setup back to back to back, and I eventually just got tired of it, and I studded it, and then I got afraid I was going to break the crank even though it was studded, so I stepped down the blower. Put a thermostat up in the top. That means coolant suddenly stops here, which will build a bunch of back pressure. I tried using T-bolt clamps to hold it, but that wasn't enough. You really need some sort of bypass, since I took away the factory bypass, so I wanted a cleaner looking bypass. So it actually has one, you just can't see it. If I can get that in here, just tapped off the bottom of the thermostat housing. It goes down, there's a hose over there. It disappears under the radiator core down there, and it goes around, and down here somewhere, that's actually the expansion tank T in here, but there's another one. Where is it? Oh, it's on the underside. I can feel it with my hand. Oh, you can almost see it there. So that one is the bypass coming in. So I do have a bypass going around the thermostat. That relieves all the pressure, everything works great. I was mentioning the internals a second ago. I put some rods in here, Molnar rods, and I have some Gibtech pistons, ported intake, which I know everybody says the ported intake doesn't do anything, but when you got everything apart, you're porting the heads and everything else, it's, you know, why not? If nothing else, I gasket matched it all, got it ported. Let's see, that's my intercooler lines here, custom made these down and through there. And so the compression on this motor is a little high, around 12 to 1. Unfortunately, it doesn't like pump gas anymore, so it's strictly an 85/race gas car. I'm not sure if that's good. It definitely limits driving as well. That's kind of a pain. Lincoln Mark 8 fan I adapted into the car. It's actually on a fan speed controller. You know, it's a soft start and varies the speed according to the engine temps. There is a giant heat exchanger in here. It's the GT500 unit, so GT500 style heat exchanger with two 10-inch spall fans, also on a speed controller, and they're controlled by the supercharger intercooler fluid determines the speed of those fans, not the IAT2, because they don't really correlate. I can explain that more sometime if someone needs. Let's take a look in the back. Supercharger intercooler tank. Let's see. I added a temp sensor. It's the one I was just talking about. So this feeds into the Megasquirt computer. So based on this tank fluid temp, it determines the speed of the fans up front. You can see splash marks here. That's actually from the lids kind of leaking. This lid is a piece of junk. I need to get that sorted out. I got an O-ring in there which helps seal a lot, but it's not doing the job. But you know how the vents normally, I actually added this one. I welded this bung in here and this one here, and I built a little overflow catch can. Once again, don't mind my fancy aluminum welds. I put some baffles in here, and I designed it so that when fluid comes up, it basically slushes in here. It doesn't really ever make it out here. Interior. Okay, pretty stock, minus a few gauges. What's not stock, you can't see, of course, and that would be the computer stuff. Well, I guess you can kind of see the computer because I have some wires ripped out here. This is something, a little speed converter deal. We'll talk about more of that in the future. That's to do with traction control. So I went ahead and installed a Megasquirt computer, but it's not one of the new plug-and-play ones that everybody's familiar with. I did this pre-plug-and-play stuff. This was years ago. And I built the screen to go with it. Sorry, I'm just pointing here. It actually sits behind the dash in here. The stock computer's still in there. And the reason I have a stock computer is because of all these stock gauges. These gauges require the stock computer to feed them signal to work. And I didn't want to put an aftermarket deal in here. I kind of like the stock gauges. I left the stock computer to control that, but I disconnected it from the engine, and instead I built this gauge set here. These are kind of handy when you're cruising along to see these values. So this actually data logs, and it has Wi-Fi. And what it does, which is pretty neat while I'm driving, it's storing everything, data logging, and I actually installed a real-time clock in there as well for non-computer people. That means that it stores the actual correct date and time. That means your data logs are time-stamped with the correct date and time, which is very handy when you're trying to dig through your logs and you're wondering, you know, when did this log come from? So I have all that on there, and what happens is I have some scripts on there that run in the background, and they look for my computers at home. So as soon as I get back near the house, it sees that, my computer over there, and it uploads the logs. It's kind of slick because then all I do is I just get out of the car, walk into my computer, and all those data logs are just sitting there waiting for me. I don't have to connect to the car, I don't have to extract them, none of that stuff. I have something else to show you round back. Probably the most controversial part of a Cobra there is. Let's go take a look. Behold, the almighty solid rear axle. I know everybody freaks out over these and says it's not a Cobra anymore. Yeah, I don't care. You know what? I have the IRS sitting in the metal building like 30 feet away. I can throw back in at any time, so really not too concerned about that. This is a 35 spline. What is it? I think strange axle unit. I actually had somebody build this for me because at the time I was having some issues with my back. So it doesn't flex much, so it needs an anti-roll bar at minimum. It doesn't have sway bars or anything in this car right now, so that needs to be addressed. I can't do the traditional over-the-top anti-roll bar because of this 3-inch over-axle exhaust. I know it's a monstrous exhaust. I really struggled to get that to work for many, many hours. So the option here is an under-axle anti-roll bar that would come down here and weld up into the frame. That's the first thing on the agenda for this car. So these huge supercharger intercooler lines, it's 1-inch inside diameter line, about 1 1/4 outside diameter. Massive lines, and you can see them again in the trunk. Wanted to mention something because I see so many guys take these lines and they run them through their suspension. It's just looking to die. So what I did was I took these two lines here, they run up through here, they go back there in between the body panels of the car. They'll run inside these body panels here, and they come down through the body into here. Let's bend down here. If you take a look, You don't see any lines out here. Nothing. That's just crazy. That's just waiting to burst and end up under here. They run inside the body there, all the way through. And then you still can't see them because they come up behind here, inside the fender liner, inside the fender, go down the bottom here, and then over here in the engine bay is the first time you see them come out. With a car like this, there's so many things I'm sure I left out a lot, like what transmission's in the car. T56 Magnum, RXT 1200 clutch. I ran the regular RXT, 2 of them actually, prior to that, and they only lasted about 5,000 miles a piece. Probably just overpowering them, I guess. So I went to the 1200, we'll see how long that lasts. It's never had any real power on it other than just, you know, goofing around. What pulleys are on the car? 8-pound lower. I don't even know what the upper is. Let's go take a look. What do we have? Oh, it's a 3-1. Oh, that's a baby pulley. Well, a good starter one to get us going. And if you're wondering where you get polished VMP pulleys, well, you don't. I just took the black one, stripped the anodizing off and polished it. I actually polished it to like a mirror-like finish initially, and then it looked goofy. It didn't match anything. So we dulled it back down so it kind of matches the rest of the satin type finish on the motor. Used to be an antenna over there. I smoothed it out and welded it right before paint because I had to blend in the fenders with the new hood. Okay, so you have a basic overview of the Cobra and what's to come. This is going to be a whole new adventure for me myself because it's a new engine, suspension, rear end setup that I'm not familiar with. It's actually went in the car about 4 years ago. Unfortunately, I hurt my back really bad and I couldn't drive the car for a long time. Heck, I couldn't even walk there for a while. So the car's been sitting for a long time. It hasn't been dialed in. It's never even been ripped completely wide open on the setup. Mostly because it's missing sway bars and anti-roll bars. It just flops around like a wet noodle, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to tear out that rear suspension with a solid upper aluminum bushings that have no flex. That's not good. So it's time. I'm in good shape. Well, a lot better shape. Let's go with that. So I'm going to get the anti-roll bar welded in. It's going to be the first thing. Then we can start hammering on this, start opening it up. I'll need to get better wheels and tires on it again. And we'll get the tune dialed in on the top end, and we'll see what it does. And then I want to take it to the track. Like I said before, this thing hasn't been to the track, and I don't even remember. It's been way too long, and it's definitely never been on a solid axle and new suspension setup. So I think it's going to be fun dialing it in, seeing where it's at, and see what the car does. First order of business, oil change. Oil's changed. Now I'm out on the required oil change test drive. I don't make the rules. That's just how it is. Forgot how much fun this car was to drive. I think I know I don't have the anti-roll bar installed yet, and the suspension in the rear can't really twist, but I feel like I need to do at least a small second gear pull. Just a little bit. I'm dying to kind of feel this car out again. So let's just give it a little bit. I was barely touching the gas, but I could feel that. That's exciting.